Growing up in the Martinez household meant understanding the hierarchy from an early age. Elena, my older sister by 4 years, was destined to be the family success story: pre-med at Northwestern, acceptance to medical school, residency at Mayo Clinic, and now a thriving orthopedic surgery practice in downtown Seattle. I was the creative one, which in our family was code for the one who'll probably struggle financially forever. Music isn't a career, Mija, Mom would say whenever I talked about my dreams of working in the industry. It's a hobby. Elena is going to save lives. What are you going to do, play guitar on street corners? The comments stung, but they weren't entirely unfair. By the time I turned 30, my music career looked exactly like what my family had predicted. A series of small gigs, session work that barely paid rent, and a collection of songs I'd written that no one seemed interested in hearing. I lived in a cramped apartment in East Nashville, sharing space with 2 roommates and surviving on a diet that consisted primarily of ramen and whatever free food I could find at music industry events. Elena, meanwhile, had everything our parents had dreamed of for their daughters. She owned a beautiful home in an upscale Seattle neighborhood, drove a BMW, and could afford to take vacations to Europe whenever she felt like it. More importantly, she had the respect and admiration of our entire extended family. Dr. Martinez, they called her at family gatherings, always emphasizing the title. I was just Sophia, or more often, Elena's sister who's still trying to make it in music. The pattern was established early and reinforced constantly. Elena's achievements were celebrated with family dinners and Facebook posts that garnered hundreds of likes from relatives. My small victories, landing a session gig with a touring band, having one of my songs featured on a local radio station, getting hired to write jingles for a small advertising agency, were met with polite smiles and immediate redirections to more important topics. "That's nice, honey," Mom would say when I shared good news about my work. Elena just published another research paper in the Journal of Orthopedic Surgery. Did you see the article about her in the hospital newsletter? It wasn't that my family was deliberately cruel. They loved me in their way. But they decided long ago that Elena was the daughter who would bring honor to the family name, while I was the one they'd have to support emotionally and sometimes financially, through a series of artistic disappointments. The breaking point came when Elena announced her engagement to Robert Chin, a successful cardiologist she'd met during her residency. The wedding planning became a year-long celebration of everything Elena had achieved: her career, her financial stability, her ability to attract an equally successful partner. "We're thinking about a destination wedding," Elena told us during one of our monthly family dinners. "Maybe somewhere in Italy. Robert's family has connections there." Dad nearly choked on his wine. "Italy? Elena, that's going to be expensive." "We can afford it," she said with a shrug that somehow managed to be both casual and smug. "Between my practice and Robert's salary, money isn't really an issue." The implication was clear. Unlike some people in the family, Elena had made responsible choices that led to financial security. I kept eating my enchiladas and tried to ignore the familiar sting of comparison. The wedding planning consumed our family's conversations for months. Every dinner became a discussion of venue options, catering menus, guest lists, and flower arrangements. Elena basked in the attention, holding court like a benevolent queen, dispensing updates about her perfect life to her grateful subjects. "Sophia should sing at the ceremony," Mom suggested during one of these planning sessions. "She has such a beautiful voice." Elena's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the kind of micro-expression that siblings learn to read after decades of practice. "That's sweet, Mom, but we're hiring professional musicians. This isn't really the right venue for, well, you know." The sentence hung unfinished, but everyone understood what she meant. My amateur music wasn't appropriate for her sophisticated wedding to her successful doctor fiancé. "I could write something special," I offered, immediately regretting the desperation in my voice. "Maybe something just for the reception?" "We've already hired a band," Elena said firmly. "But thank you for offering." The rejection shouldn't have surprised me, but it still hurt. This was my sister, the person who used to sneak into my room to hear me practice guitar when we were kids, who'd once told me I was the most talented person she knew. Success had changed her, or maybe it had just revealed who she'd always been underneath the childhood affection. 3 months before the wedding, I got a call that would change everything, though I didn't realize it at the time. "Sophia Martinez?" The voice was professional, crisp, with a slight British accent. Speaking. This is James Worthington from Atlantic Records. I'm a senior A&R representative, and I've been listening to some demos that came across my desk. Your name was on several of them as a songwriter and producer. My heart stopped. Atlantic Records was calling me? Yes, I've done some writing and production work. Quite impressive work, actually. We're looking for someone with your particular style to work on a project with one of our major artists. The timeline is aggressive. We'd need you in the studio starting next week, but the compensation would be substantial. The next 20 minutes felt like a dream. James explained that they needed someone to produce and co-write songs for an album by Maya Chin, a pop artist whose last 2 records had gone platinum. Maya had specifically requested someone whose work she'd heard on some indie tracks, and my name had come up repeatedly in industry circles as an emerging talent. The thing is, James said, this would be a significant time commitment. We're talking about potentially 6 months of intensive work, including some travel for recording sessions. The artist is quite particular about maintaining creative momentum once she starts a project. I can do that, I said immediately. Excellent. We'll start with a 3-song trial. If those work out well, we'll discuss a full album deal. The compensation for the trial period alone would be $150,000, with substantial bonuses if the songs perform well commercially. After hanging up, I sat in my tiny apartment staring at the walls covered with musical equipment and half-finished song lyrics. $150,000 was more than I'd made in the previous 3 years combined. But more than the money, this was the opportunity I'd been working toward for over a decade. The next 6 months were the most intense of my life. Maya Chin turned out to be not just talented but genuinely collaborative, interested in pushing boundaries and creating something meaningful rather than just commercially viable. We worked 12-hour days in state-of-the-art studios, bringing in session musicians I'd only dreamed of working with, crafting songs that felt both innovative and accessible. You have an ear for this, Maya told me during one late-night session. Most producers try to impose their vision on my voice. You're helping me find sounds I didn't know I was capable of. The album, titled Metamorphosis, was unlike anything Maya had done before and unlike anything I'd done before. It was bold, experimental, deeply personal, and somehow completely infectious. When we finished the final track, both of us knew we'd created something special. But the music industry moves slowly, and I was sworn to secrecy about the project until the official announcements were made. 4 months, I went back to my regular life. Session work, small gigs, family dinners where Elena dominated conversations about her wedding plans, while sitting on the biggest secret of my career. Are you even working these days? Elena asked during one family dinner, 2 months before her wedding. You seem to have a lot of free time lately. I've been in the studio quite a bit, I said, which was technically true. Still doing those little demos? She asked with the tone she might use to discuss a child's art project. That's nice. Keeps you busy. The condescension was nothing new, but it felt different now. I was carrying knowledge that would fundamentally change how my family saw me, but I couldn't share it yet. Instead, I had to sit there and absorb Elena's subtle put-downs while counting down the days until the album release. Elena's wedding was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in June at an expensive venue overlooking Elliott Bay. She'd managed to pull together the kind of elegant affair that would be talked about in family circles for years: perfectly coordinated flowers, a string quartet, a 7-course dinner that probably cost more than my annual rent. I arrived at the reception wearing a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, something that looked expensive enough to fit in with Elena's crowd but hadn't actually broken my budget. The guest list was exactly what I'd expected. Successful doctors, lawyers, business executives, and their equally successful spouses. I was seated at a table with some distant cousins and family friends, far from the head table where Elena and Robert held court. The reception followed the predictable script. Toasts praising Elena's achievements, stories about her dedication to her medical career, congratulations on finding such a perfect match in Robert. Everyone spoke about her success, her intelligence, her bright future. I smiled and applauded at the appropriate moments while mentally preparing myself for the inevitable moment when someone would ask about my own career prospects. That moment came during the cocktail hour, when Elena decided to introduce me to some of Robert's colleagues from the hospital. "This is my sister Sophia," she said, her arm around my shoulders in a gesture that looked affectionate but felt performative. She's our family's creative spirit. What kind of work do you do? Asked Dr. Anderson, Robert's department head, with the polite interest that successful people show when they're trying to be gracious to someone they assume is less accomplished. Before I could answer, Elena jumped in with a laugh that was meant to sound fond but came out slightly mocking. Sophia's been trying to make it in the music industry for years. She writes songs, does some studio work. Very artistic. Failed art career, she announced to the small group that had gathered around us, her voice carrying that particular tone that siblings use when they're sharing an embarrassing family story. She's been struggling for years, she laughed, looking around the group for validation of her assessment. The words hit me like a physical blow, made worse by the setting in the audience. These were Elena's colleagues, people who represented the kind of success our family valued, and she was presenting me as the cautionary tale, the sister who'd made poor life choices and was paying the predictable price. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but I'd had years of practice at managing these situations. Art is tough, I said quietly, giving Elena the response she expected, the acknowledgement of failure that would allow the conversation to move on to more comfortable topics. But as the group prepared to shift their attention back to Elena's achievements and wedding plans, my phone buzzed in my purse. I almost ignored it. This was Elena's moment, and I wasn't going to be the person who answered a call during her wedding reception. But something made me glance at the screen, and I saw a number I didn't recognize with a Los Angeles area code. For reasons I still can't explain, I decided to answer it. Sophia Martinez? The voice was excited, professional, crackling with energy. Yes, this is Sophia. This is Patricia Williams from the Recording Academy. I'm calling with some fantastic news. Congratulations, you've been nominated for a Grammy Award for Producer of the Year for your work on Maya Chen's Metamorphosis album. The world stopped. The conversation around me, Elena's laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, the string quartet playing in the background, all faded into white noise. I was vaguely aware that the group was still standing there, waiting for me to finish my call so they could continue discussing Elena's medical career. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I managed to say. You've been nominated for Producer of the Year. The album has been nominated in 4 categories total. Album of the Year, Best Pop Vocal Album, Producer of the Year for You, and Song of the Year for Invisible Threads, which you co-wrote. The nominations will be announced publicly tomorrow morning, but we always call nominees first to give them a heads up. I looked up and saw Elena staring at me with growing irritation. Her wedding reception was not the appropriate place for me to take phone calls, especially not calls that were drawing attention away from her and her accomplishments. The Grammy Awards ceremony is in February, Patricia continued. You'll be receiving an official invitation and of course we'll want to arrange interviews with the music press. This is a tremendous honor, especially for someone so early in their producing career. Maya Chen specifically requested that we reach out to you first. She wanted to make sure you knew how much this nomination means to the entire team. Thank you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This is incredible. Congratulations again, Sophia. We'll be in touch soon with more details. I hung up the phone and looked at the group of people still standing around me, Elena, Robert, Dr. Anderson, and several other medical professionals who'd been prepared to offer polite condolences about my failed artistic ambitions. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Elena's smile had completely vanished, replaced by an expression of confusion and growing alarm. What was that about? She asked, her voice tight with control. I've been nominated for a Grammy Award, I said, the words feeling surreal as they came out of my mouth. For Producer of the Year. Dr. Anderson's eyebrows shot up. A Grammy? As in the Grammy Awards? Yes. For an album I produced with Maya Chen. It's also nominated for Album of the Year. The group exchanged glances, trying to process this information. Elena looked like someone had just told her that gravity was no longer applicable in this particular location. Maya Chen? Robert asked. The pop singer? Her new album. Metamorphosis, I confirmed. We worked on it for 6 months. It went platinum last month. Elena's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. You never said you were working with Maya Chen. I was under a non-disclosure agreement until the album was released. I couldn't talk about it. But you've been. We thought you were. Elena struggled to find words that wouldn't sound as condescending as her earlier assessment of my career. You've been doing session work and small gigs. I've been doing a lot of things, I said, including producing one of the biggest albums of the year, apparently. Dr. Anderson was the first to recover from the shock. This is extraordinary. Grammy nominations are incredibly prestigious. Do you mind me asking, what does something like this mean for your career? It was a question I was still trying to answer myself. It means I'll probably have more opportunities to work with major artists. The financial compensation for this project alone has been substantial. Elena looked like she was going to be sick. The sister she just described as a failure to her husband's colleagues had apparently been secretly achieving the kind of success that most people can only dream about. How substantial? Robert asked, with the bluntness of someone accustomed to discussing money professionally. I hesitated. The numbers were almost embarrassing to say out loud, especially in contrast to how my family had perceived my financial situation. The producer fee for this album was $2.8 million. Plus royalties that should continue for years. The champagne glass in Elena's hand started to shake. $2.8 million? Dr. Anderson repeated. For one album? It's been #1 for 8 weeks, I explained. Maya's previous albums were very successful, so the label was willing to pay for the right producer. Apparently, I was the right producer. Elena set down her champagne glass carefully as if she was afraid she might drop it. The group around us had grown larger. Other wedding guests had noticed the intense conversation and were drifting over to see what was happening. Grammy nomination, Elena repeated slowly as if she was trying to make the words make sense. You're nominated for a Grammy. Producer of the Year, I confirmed, along with some of the biggest names in the industry. Mom appeared at my elbow, having noticed the commotion. What's everyone talking about? Sophia, who was on the phone. Before I could answer, Dr. Anderson jumped in with obvious excitement. Your daughter has been nominated for a Grammy Award. She produced Maya Chen's new album. Mom's face went through the same progression of expressions I'd seen on Elena's face moments earlier. Confusion, disbelief, and slowly dawning realization. A Grammy? She asked weakly. For nominations, actually, I clarified. The album is up for Album of the Year too. The crowd around us was growing larger, and I could see Dad pushing through the other guests to find out what was causing such a stir at his daughter's wedding reception. Elena stood frozen in the center of it all, watching her carefully orchestrated celebration transform into something else entirely. This was supposed to be her day, her moment to shine in front of everyone who mattered to her, and instead everyone was talking about her sister's secret success. 4 Grammy nominations, someone repeated in an odd voice. Maya Chen, someone else added. That album is incredible. Did you know about this? Dad asked Mom, who shook her head in amazement. We had no idea, Mom said. We thought she was still doing small studio work. Elena finally found her voice again. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, and for the first time all evening she sounded less like the condescending older sister and more like someone who was genuinely hurt by being excluded from something so important. I couldn't, I said. Non-disclosure agreements are standard in the industry, especially for high-profile projects. I wasn't allowed to discuss any details until after the album was released and the label decided to submit it for Grammy consideration. But this is huge, Robert said, looking back and forth between Elena and me as if he was seeing our family dynamic for the first time. This is career-defining success. Elena's face was pale now, and I realized that she was processing more than just the surprise of my nomination. She was remembering years of condescending comments, dismissive remarks about my career, and most recently her announcement to this very group of people that I had a failed art career. Elena, I said quietly, I'm sorry this happened at your wedding. I didn't know they were going to call today. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her struggling with emotions that were far more complex than simple surprise or even embarrassment. No, she said finally, I'm the one who should apologize. What I said earlier about your career. I had no idea. The admission hung in the air between us, witnessed by her husband's colleagues and our parents and a growing crowd of wedding guests who were all trying to understand how the family failure had secretly become the family's biggest success story. It's okay, I said. You couldn't have known. But I should have supported you. Elena said, her voice getting stronger. Even if I didn't understand what you were doing, even if it looked like you were struggling, I should have been encouraging instead of what I was. The crowd around us had grown to include most of the wedding reception, and I realized that Elena's moment of public acknowledgement was happening in front of everyone she'd wanted to impress with her own achievements. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert said, raising his champagne glass and speaking loudly enough for the entire reception to hear. "I think we need to add another toast to tonight's celebration. To Sophia Martinez, Grammy nominee and apparently secret musical genius." The room erupted in applause and cheers, and I found myself accepting congratulations from dozens of people who an hour earlier had probably seen me as Elena's less successful sister. Elena stood beside me through it all, smiling and accepting congratulations on my behalf, but I could see the complexity of emotions playing across her face. Pride, certainly, and genuine happiness for my success, but also something that looked like grief, perhaps for the sister relationship we might have had if she hadn't spent so many years convinced that my dreams were foolish. Later, after the reception had ended and the guest had gone home, Elena and I found ourselves alone on the venue's terrace overlooking the water. "I owe you more than just an apology," she said, still wearing her wedding dress but having kicked off the expensive shoes that had been pinching her feet all evening. "Elena, you don't." "Yes, I do." She turned to face me and I could see tears in her eyes. "I've been a terrible sister. For years I've been so focused on proving that I made the right choices, the responsible choices, that I completely dismissed your dreams. Worse than dismissed them, I mocked them. You were protecting me in your way," I said. "You didn't want me to get hurt by chasing something unrealistic." "No," she said firmly. "I was protecting myself. I was so invested in being the successful one, the one who had it all figured out, that I needed you to be the one who was struggling. It made me feel better about my own choices." The honesty was painful but necessary. We'd both known the dynamic existed, but neither of us had ever acknowledged it so directly. "Your success doesn't diminish mine," I said. "You're an amazing doctor. You save people's lives. That matters. And your success doesn't diminish mine either," she replied. But I acted like it would. I acted like there was only room for one successful daughter in this family, and I'd already claimed that spot. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, looking out at the water and processing the events of the evening. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said eventually. "Of course. When you were sitting there earlier listening to me tell everyone about your failed art career, and you knew you'd just been nominated for a Grammy, how did you not punch me in the face?" I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had all evening. "I thought about it. I would have deserved it. Maybe. But I've learned that success is its own revenge. I didn't need to defend myself because I knew that reality would speak louder than anything I could say." Elena nodded thoughtfully. Reality certainly spoke tonight. The Grammy Awards ceremony 4 months later was everything I'd dreamed of and more. I didn't win Producer of the Year. That honor went to a veteran producer whose body of work spanned decades, but Metamorphosis won Album of the Year, and Maya Chin thanked me specifically in her acceptance speech. "To Sophia Martinez," she said, holding the Grammy up to the audience, "who heard sounds in my voice that I didn't know existed and helped me create something I'm genuinely proud of." Elena was in the audience that night, having flown to Los Angeles specifically to support me. When the camera panned to my table during Maya's speech, you could see her in the background, crying and applauding with genuine pride and excitement. After the ceremony at one of the many after-parties, Elena pulled me aside. "I have something to tell you," she said. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened at my wedding, about how I treated you over the years, and I want to make some changes." "Elena, we've talked about this. We're good." "Let me finish," she said. "I'm thinking about taking a sabbatical from my practice. Maybe a year off to do some volunteer medical work overseas, or to explore some research opportunities I've been ignoring because they weren't as financially lucrative." "That sounds amazing. But what brought this on?" "Watching you tonight, seeing how happy you are doing work that you love, work that matters to you. It made me realize that I've been so focused on building a successful career that I forgot to think about whether it was actually fulfilling." She paused, looking around at the party full of musicians, producers, and industry professionals who were celebrating their passion for creating art. "I became a doctor because it was prestigious and financially secure. And I'm good at it, and I do help people. But I don't love it the way you love music. I don't wake up excited about what I'm going to create that day. There's nothing wrong with choosing security, I said. Not everyone needs to be an artist. Maybe not. But everyone should have the chance to pursue what makes them feel alive. And I spent so many years convincing you that wasn't practical or realistic when really I was just jealous that you had the courage to try. Elena did take that sabbatical, spending 8 months doing medical work in Central America and then returning to Seattle to start a non-profit clinic focused on providing healthcare to underserved communities. She makes less money now, but when we talk on the phone she sounds happier than she has in years. As for me, the Grammy nomination opened doors I'd never imagined. I've produced albums for artists across multiple genres, won several industry awards, and built a recording studio in Nashville that's become known for its innovative approach to sound design. But the moment that mattered most wasn't winning any award or achieving any particular milestone. It was standing on that terrace with Elena after her wedding, both of us finally honest about who we'd been to each other and who we wanted to be going forward. Success isn't just about achieving your dreams. Sometimes it's about proving that your dreams were worth pursuing in the first place, even when everyone around you thought they were impossible. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, it's about inspiring the people you love to pursue their own version of those dreams, even if it means admitting they were wrong about yours.
You're just a gold digger, my mother-in-law Patricia sneered, waving my late grandmother's jewelry box in front of me. These beautiful pieces belong to someone who deserves them, my Emily. I sat quietly at her elaborate dining room table, watching as she roughly handled the antique rosewood box that had been in my family for generations. My name is Isabella Martinez, and at 34, I was watching my mother-in-law attempt to steal what she thought was my inheritance to benefit her precious daughter. What she didn't know was that I was perfectly calm for a reason. These will help Emily with a down payment on her dream house. Patricia continued, her voice dripping with satisfaction. After all, she's actually blood family, unlike you. She opened the box, displaying the glittering pieces inside with obvious greed in her eyes. I took a sip of the tea she'd served, hiding my smile behind the cup. Are you sure you want to do this, Patricia? I asked quietly. Those pieces have been in my grandmother's family for generations. Oh please, she scoffed, picking up what appeared to be a stunning diamond necklace. Your grandmother was just a small-town jewelry maker. These are probably cheap costume pieces anyway, but they'll fetch enough for Emily's house deposit. If only she knew, my grandmother hadn't been just a small-town jewelry maker. She'd been one of the most skilled artisans in her field, known for her ability to create perfect replicas of priceless pieces. She'd also been incredibly wise about protecting her real treasures. Besides, Patricia continued, her voice sharp, these should have gone to Emily anyway. You've been married to my son for 5 years, and what have you contributed? No children, just your little teaching job. Emily needs these more than you do. I thought about the real jewelry collection safely stored in a bank vault my grandmother had set up years ago. She taught me well about protecting what mattered. Every piece in that box has a story, I said softly. Are you sure you don't want to hear them before you sell them? Patricia rolled her eyes. Stories don't pay for houses, Isabella. I've already contacted an auction house. They're coming tomorrow to collect everything. She closed the box with a decisive snap. Maybe this will teach you that in this family, blood matters more than marriage. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. You might want to check the box again, Patricia. There's more to it than meets the eye. What are you babbling about? She demanded, but I could see a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. My grandmother always said that true value lies beneath the surface, I replied, heading for the door. You might want to look more carefully before you contact that auction house. Are you threatening me? Patricia's voice rose, her face flushing red. Wait until I tell David about this. He'll finally see what kind of woman he married. I paused at the door, thinking about my husband, who was currently on a business trip. By all means, tell David. In fact, I encourage you to have everything properly appraised before you make any decisions. As I drove home, I couldn't help but smile, remembering the day my grandmother had shown me the truth about her jewelry collection. I was 16, and she called me into her workshop, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Bella, she'd said, holding up 2 identical diamond necklaces. Which one is real? I'd studied them carefully, but couldn't tell the difference. That's when she taught me her most valuable lesson about protecting what matters. Every piece in her collection had a perfect replica, and only she knew which was which. She'd spent years creating them, preparing for exactly this kind of situation. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Stop trying to scare me with your ridiculous hints. These jewels are being sold tomorrow, and that's final." I didn't reply. Instead, I called Laura, my grandmother's old friend who worked at the auction house Patricia had contacted. "It's starting," I told her. "She's bringing in the replicas tomorrow." Laura chuckled. "Don't worry, honey. I'll make sure everything goes exactly as your grandmother planned." That evening, as I sat in my study looking at photos of my grandmother, I remembered her words. People who take what isn't theirs often learn their lessons the hard way. Patricia was about to learn just how right my grandmother had been. My phone rang again. It was David. "Bella, my mother just called me, ranting about you threatening her over some jewelry. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. "Your mother is trying to sell my grandmother's jewelry collection to help Emily buy a house. She took the box from our house while you were away." There was a long pause. "She did what?" "Bella, I'm so sorry. I'll talk to her, make her return everything." "No," I said firmly. "Let her go through with it. Trust me, David. Sometimes people need to learn lessons for themselves." "What are you planning?" he asked, knowing me well enough to hear the certainty in my voice. "Just wait," I replied. "Tomorrow is going to be very interesting." As I hung up, I walked to my home office and opened my grandmother's old diary. Inside was a detailed inventory of every piece in her collection, both the originals and the replicas. Patricia thought she was selling precious jewelry to help her daughter, but what she didn't know was that my grandmother had designed each replica with a special feature, a kind of signature that would be impossible to miss during a proper appraisal. Tomorrow, Patricia would learn exactly what happened to people who tried to steal from my grandmother's legacy. I smiled, thinking about the secret compartment in the box that Patricia hadn't found yet. The one containing my grandmother's letter explaining exactly what she'd done with the real jewelry collection. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about confrontation. It's about letting people walk right into the traps they set for themselves. The next morning, I arrived at the auction house just as Patricia was strutting through the front doors, the rosewood box clutched triumphantly in her arms. Emily trailed behind her, already dressed like she owned a mansion instead of the small apartment she shared with 3 roommates. Laura met them at the reception desk, her professional demeanor perfect as she welcomed them. I stayed in the background, watching the scene unfold. "These are museum-quality pieces," Patricia announced loudly, setting the box on Laura's desk. "My mother-in-law collected them over many years." The lie rolled smoothly off her tongue, as though she hadn't spent years dismissing my grandmother as a simple craftswoman. Laura opened the box carefully, her trained eyes scanning each piece. I saw the moment she spotted my grandmother's signature marks, the tiny, almost invisible details that distinguished the replicas from the originals. Her expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight twitch of her lips. "Very interesting pieces," Laura murmured, lifting the diamond necklace Patricia had been so excited about. "Let me call our senior appraiser, Mr. Thompson. He specializes in vintage jewelry." Patricia preened, already counting the money in her head. "Emily, darling, soon you'll have your dream house. Won't that be wonderful?" Emily nodded eagerly. "Maybe we can even get that 5-bedroom in the gated community, the one with the pool." I had to hold back a laugh. They were about to learn an expensive lesson about counting chickens before they hatched. Mr. Thompson arrived, his white gloves and magnifying glass at the ready. He began examining each piece methodically, his expression growing more intrigued with each item he inspected. "Fascinating," he said finally, setting down a sapphire bracelet. "These are some of the finest replicas I've ever seen." The word replicas hit Patricia like a physical blow. "What do you mean, replicas?" she demanded, her voice rising. "These are genuine antiques." Mr. Thompson adjusted his glasses. "Oh, they're certainly valuable in their own right. These are masterwork replicas crafted by someone with extraordinary skill. Each piece has a tiny maker's mark. See here." He pointed to a nearly invisible symbol on the necklace. "This is the signature of Elena Martinez, one of the most renowned jewelry replicators of her time." Patricia's face went from red to white in seconds. "No, that's impossible. These are real." "Actually," Laura interjected smoothly, "Elena Martinez was known for creating perfect replicas of famous pieces. Her work is highly valued in certain circles, but not quite in the way you might have hoped." She named a figure that was about 1/10 of what Patricia had clearly been expecting. Emily's dreams of a poolside mansion visibly crumbled. But Mom, you said. Where are the real pieces? Patricia whirled to face me, finally noticing my presence. You know about this. I stepped forward, pulling out my grandmother's letter from my bag. I tried to tell you to check the box more carefully, Patricia. Maybe now you'd like to look at that secret compartment. Laura demonstrated how to press the hidden catch, revealing a small space beneath the jewelry trays. Inside lay a single envelope, yellowed with age. Patricia snatched it up, her hands shaking as she read my grandmother's elegant handwriting. To whoever thinks they can take what isn't theirs. The real collection is exactly where it belongs, safe from those who value gold over family. What you hold are my masterworks, replicas I created to protect my true legacy. Remember, not all that glitters is gold, and not all family is bound by blood. You tricked me, Patricia's voice echoed through the auction house. No, I replied calmly. You tried to steal what wasn't yours, and you didn't even bother to learn its true history. My grandmother spent years creating these replicas because she knew someday someone would try to take advantage of her legacy. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. I would point out that these replicas are still quite valuable to collectors. Elena Martinez's work is highly sought after in certain circles. But Patricia wasn't listening. She was too busy fumbling with her phone, probably trying to reach David. I'd already texted him the whole story, including photos of the letter and his mother's attempt to sell my inheritance. Emily slumped in her chair, her dreams of instant wealth evaporating. Mom, what are we going to do about the house? I already told everyone. Perhaps, I suggested quietly, this is a good time to learn about earning things for yourself, instead of taking them from others. Patricia grabbed the box, her movements jerky with rage. This isn't over, she threatened, heading for the door. David will hear all about how you humiliated us. I watched them leave, feeling oddly peaceful. Laura approached me, holding back a smile. Your grandmother would have loved this, she said. She always said the best lessons come from our own mistakes. She also said that true value isn't about what something costs. I replied, thinking of the real jewelry collection still safely stored away. It's about what it teaches us. As I headed home, I thought about how my grandmother's wisdom had extended far beyond her craft. She'd known that someday someone would try to take advantage of her legacy. Instead of just locking everything away, she created this elaborate lesson, turning her skill into both protection and education. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Just talked to Mom. Coming home early. We need to have a family meeting. I smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of some much-needed changes in our family dynamic. Patricia had learned an expensive lesson about greed and assumptions. Now it was time to see if she'd learned anything about the true meaning of family. David came home the next day, his face etched with a mix of exhaustion and determination. We sat in our living room as I showed him everything. My grandmother's letter, photos of the real jewelry collection, and most importantly, the security camera footage of his mother taking a box from our house while we were away. I knew she could be difficult, he said, running a hand through his hair. But this, stealing from our house, trying to sell your inheritance? I never thought she'd go this far. It's been building for years, I replied softly. The snide comments about my family, the constant favoritism toward Emily, the way she's tried to undermine our marriage. This was just her biggest move yet. Before David could respond, our doorbell rang. Patricia stood there, Emily trailing behind her like a chastened shadow. Gone was the triumphant smirk she'd worn yesterday. Now she looked like someone who'd swallowed something bitter. Well? She demanded, pushing past us into the living room. Are you happy now, Isabella? You've humiliated us in front of everyone. David stepped forward, his voice firm. No, Mom, you humiliated yourself. You broke into our house and tried to steal from my wife. Steal? Patricia's voice rose. I was trying to help your sister. Family helps family. Yes, I interjected calmly. Family does help family. But you've never seen me as family, have you, Patricia? The room fell silent. Emily shifted uncomfortably on her feet, looking anywhere but at me. I have something to show you, I said, opening my laptop. The video played clearly, Patricia entering our house with her spare key, which was meant for emergencies only, heading straight for my study where the jewelry box was kept. You spied on me, Patricia gasped. No, David answered for me. She protected her home. Like any sensible person would. I opened another file, Photos of the real jewelry collection, each piece gleaming with authentic beauty. These are the originals, I explained. Safe where my grandmother put them years ago. She created the replicas not just to protect her work, but to teach a lesson about value and trust. Patricia sank onto our couch, her bravado finally cracking. All this time you knew? Of course I knew. My grandmother taught me more than just about jewelry. She taught me about protecting what matters, about watching and waiting, about letting people reveal their true characters through their own actions. Emily spoke up for the first time, her voice small. The house I wanted. I told everyone I was getting it. Maybe, I suggested, it's time to think about earning things for yourself. My grandmother built her collection piece by piece. She taught me that anything worth having is worth working for. David placed a hand on my shoulder. Mom, you need to return the spare key. And we need to set some serious boundaries going forward. Patricia clutched her handbag, looking trapped. But we're family. Yes, I agreed. We are. And family should respect each other, support each other, not steal and scheme against each other. My grandmother's replicas weren't just copies. They were a test. One you failed spectacularly. What happens now? Emily asked, finally meeting my eyes. I pulled out an envelope. Inside is information about a first-time home buyers program, real estate courses, financial planning resources. If you're serious about wanting a house, here's how you can work toward it, legitimately. Emily took the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. Patricia stood abruptly. This isn't what I came for. I came for an apology. No, David said firmly. You came hoping to bully us into giving you what you wanted. That's not happening anymore. Things are going to change. As they left, Patricia's shoulders slumped in defeat. I thought about my grandmother's words. Sometimes the most valuable things we own are the lessons we learn. A week later, Emily called me, her voice hesitant. I signed up for one of those real estate courses, and I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a start. Patricia still avoided family gatherings, nursing her wounded pride, but her power over our lives was broken. David and I were stronger for having faced this together, and I knew my grandmother would have been proud. The jewelry box sits in my study now, filled with the replicas, a reminder that true value isn't always about what something costs, but what it teaches us about ourselves and others. Sometimes the most precious things we own are the wisdom to wait, the strength to stand firm, and the courage to let truth reveal itself in its own time. My grandmother's real legacy wasn't just in the genuine pieces she created, but in the lessons she left behind. Lessons about patience, protection, and the true meaning of family. As I look at the box now, I smile, knowing that its greatest value was never in the jewelry it contained, but in the truth it revealed. The master bedroom needs to be cleared by tonight, my mother-in-law Barbara announced, marching into my house with moving boxes. Amanda needs her space properly set up. She gestured to the young woman trailing behind her, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. I stood in my kitchen, coffee mug gripped tightly in my hand, watching this surreal scene unfold. Amanda, my husband's girlfriend of 6 months, shifted nervously from foot to foot, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. And where exactly am I supposed to go? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Barbara waved dismissively toward the back of the house. The garage has that small room attached. That should be fine for now, until you figure out your next steps. My name is Olivia, and at 34, I was watching my mother-in-law try to install my husband's girlfriend in my own home. The same home I'd spent the last 8 years turning into a sanctuary. The same home that now felt like it was being invaded. This is my house, I said firmly, setting down my coffee before I gave in to the urge to throw it. Barbara's laugh was sharp and cruel. This house belongs to the family. Michael needs it now for his new life. You should be grateful we're letting you stay at all. Michael, my husband of 10 years, had moved out 3 months ago, claiming he needed space to find himself. Apparently, he'd found himself in the arms of his 25-year-old yoga instructor. I'd known about Amanda for weeks, but them trying to move her into my home, was a new level of audacity. I'm not moving to the garage, I stated, crossing my arms. And Amanda isn't moving in here. Don't be difficult, Olivia. Barbara stepped closer, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at my face. This house has been in our family for generations. Michael's grandfather built it. You're just the soon-to-be ex-wife. You have no right to it. What Barbara didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Michael's grandfather Thomas had been more than just the man who built this house. He'd been my mentor, my friend, and in many ways, more of a parent to me than Barbara had ever been to Michael. I'd spent countless evenings with Thomas in his final years, listening to his stories, learning about the family history, and helping him organize his affairs. Barbara had been too busy with her social clubs to visit him, and Michael had always found excuses not to stop by. But I was there, 3 times a week, until the very end. The movers will be here this afternoon, Barbara continued, already measuring the windows for new curtains. Amanda has excellent taste. This place could use a more youthful touch. I watched as Amanda ran her hand along the kitchen counter, the same counter where Thomas had taught me to make his secret recipe pasta sauce. Every surface in this house held memories, not just of my marriage, but of the real family I found here. I have some work calls to make, I said calmly, picking up my coffee again. I'll be in my office. Your office? Barbara scoffed. That's going to be Amanda's yoga room. She'll need somewhere to train her clients. I closed my door on Barbara's continued demands and pulled out my phone. With trembling fingers, I dialed a number I'd memorized months ago. Mr. Patterson? It's Olivia. I think it's time. The lawyer's voice was calm and reassuring. I was wondering when you'd call. Shall I proceed with opening the trust documents? Yes, I replied, hearing Barbara and Amanda's voices float up from downstairs as they discussed paint colors. It's definitely time. What they didn't know was that Thomas, in his final months, had done more than just share stories with me. He'd seen exactly who his family had become. Barbara's materialistic manipulation, Michael's weak-willed selfishness, and he planned accordingly. I hung up with Mr. Patterson and opened my desk drawer, pulling out an old envelope. Inside was a letter Thomas had given me 2 weeks before he passed away. Only open this when you need it most, he'd said, his wise eyes twinkling with that familiar mix of mischief and kindness. I'd known this day was coming. I'd seen the signs in Michael's growing distance, in Barbara's increasingly hostile behavior. Thomas had seen it too, long before any of us were ready to admit it. Downstairs, I heard the front door open and Michael's voice join the others. The movers are on their way, he called out. Mom, did you tell Olivia about the garage? I ran my fingers over Thomas's letter, remembering his last words to me. Sometimes, my dear, justice comes in unexpected ways. Just be patient and trust in what we've planned. The sound of footsteps on the stairs told me they were coming to confront me again. I tucked the letter away and squared my shoulders. Let them come. Let them make their plans and measure their curtains. The trust documents would be unsealed tomorrow morning, and then they'd learn what Thomas had known all along. That family isn't about blood or marriage. It's about who shows up, who cares, who stays. Barbara's sharp knock rattled my office door. Olivia, the movers need to get in there. I smiled, thinking of Thomas and the future he'd helped secure. Come in, Barbara. We need to talk about the house. The door swung open, and there they stood. Barbara, Michael, and Amanda, ready to claim what they thought was rightfully theirs. They had no idea what was coming, what's there to talk about. Michael asked, leaning against my office doorframe with that familiar look of smug confidence. Mom's right. This is a family house. You're not family anymore. I sat calmly at my desk, fingers tracing the edge of Thomas's letter. Actually, there's quite a lot to discuss. Mr. Patterson, the family lawyer, will be here in 20 minutes. Barbara's perfectly penciled eyebrows shot up. Patterson. Why would that old fool be coming here? Because I called him, I replied simply, and he's bringing some important documents that all of you need to see. Michael straightened up, his smugness wavering slightly. He remembered Mr. Patterson from his grandfather's funeral, the stern-faced lawyer who'd given him a disapproving look when he checked his phone during the eulogy. Whatever game you're playing, Olivia, Barbara started, but the doorbell cut her off. That'll be him now, I said, standing up. Shall we move this to the living room? They followed me downstairs, Barbara whispering furiously to Michael while Amanda trailed behind, clutching her designer bag like a security blanket. Mr. Patterson stood at the door, his weathered briefcase in hand, looking exactly as he had the day Thomas had introduced us. Mrs. Collins, he nodded to me, then turned a cool gaze to the others. Barbara, Michael. And this must be the girlfriend. Amanda flushed red as Barbara bristled. Now see here, Patterson. Please, he interrupted. Let's all sit down. We have important matters to discuss. Once everyone was seated, Barbara perched on the edge of the sofa like she was ready to pounce, Michael slouched in his father's old armchair, Amanda hovering uncertainly nearby. Mr. Patterson opened his briefcase. Before his death, the lawyer began, Thomas Collins made certain arrangements regarding this property, arrangements he specifically asked me not to reveal until they became necessary. What arrangements? Michael demanded. Grandpa left everything to the family. Mr. Patterson pulled out a thick envelope. Actually, Michael, your grandfather left this house in a very specific trust. A trust that named one particular person as its executor and primary beneficiary. Barbara's face went pale. That's impossible. This house has always passed through the male line. It belongs to Michael. Not according to this, Mr. Patterson said, removing several documents from the envelope. Thomas was quite clear about his wishes. The house and everything in it was to be placed in trust for the person who, in his words, showed true understanding of what family means. He turned to me, extending the papers. Olivia has the name trustee and beneficiary. These belong to you. The silence in the room was deafening. I took the documents, remembering all those evenings with Thomas, how he'd watched me care for his home, tend his garden, listen to his stories while his own family was too busy to visit. This is ridiculous. Barbara exploded, jumping to her feet. She manipulated him. She took advantage of a sick old man. Mr. Patterson's voice cut through her accusations like steel. Thomas was of completely sound mind when he made these arrangements. In fact, he specifically anticipated this reaction. He pulled out another paper. He left a letter explaining his decision. Shall I read it? Michael was staring at me, his face a mix of shock and dawning comprehension. He remembered all the times I'd invited him to visit his grandfather, all the dinners he'd skipped, all the family stories he'd been too busy to hear. To my family, Mr. Patterson read, if you're hearing this letter being read, it means you've forgotten what truly matters. This house was built not just with bricks and mortar, but with love, with the hope of creating a place where family would grow and thrive. Olivia understood this. While you were all busy with your own lives, she sat with me, learned our history, and showed me what it means to be truly family. The house is hers, to use as she sees fit. Perhaps this will teach you that family is earned, not simply claimed by blood or marriage. Barbara sank back onto the sofa, her face ashen. Michael stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair in that nervous gesture I knew so well. The movers, Amanda said suddenly, her voice small. They're supposed to be coming. You should probably cancel them, I suggested quietly, since you won't be moving in after all. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. There's more. The trust also stipulates that any attempt to contest these arrangements will result in the house being donated to the Historical Society. Thomas was quite thorough in ensuring his wishes would be respected. Barbara's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Michael looked lost, like a child who'd just been told Santa wasn't real. Amanda had already grabbed her phone, presumably to cancel the movers. Now, I said, standing up, I think it's time for everyone to leave. I have some redecorating to do. I looked directly at Barbara, and I won't be needing that garage room after all. The days following Mr. Patterson's revelation brought a parade of reactions from the family. Barbara launched into damage control mode, calling relatives to spin her version of events before word got out that she tried to move her son's girlfriend into my house. Michael oscillated between angry texts and pathetic attempts at reconciliation. We can still work this out, he wrote one evening. The house is big enough for both of us. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I spent my time restoring the house to the way Thomas had loved it. I rehung his old photographs that Barbara had deemed outdated. I brought his favorite armchair back from the attic where Michael had banished it. Each change felt like reclaiming not just my space, but Thomas's legacy. A week after the trust revelation, I was tending Thomas's rose garden when a car pulled into the driveway. It was Amanda, looking considerably less confident than the day she'd walked in planning to take my bedroom. Can we talk? She asked, hovering by the garden gate. I gestured to the patio chairs. 5 minutes. She sat, fidgeting with her bracelet. I didn't know, she burst out. About the house, about Thomas, about any of it. Michael told me you were just his bitter ex who wouldn't let go. And you believed him, I said, not unkindly. Just like you believed Barbara when she said you could move in here. Amanda looked down. I'm starting to see why Thomas chose you. Michael. He's not who I thought he was. Last night he suggested we try to contest the trust anyway, said we could figure out a way around it. I couldn't help but laugh. That sounds like Michael, always looking for the easy way out. I ended it, she said quietly. This whole thing opened my eyes. I don't want to be part of a family that treats people this way. As she left, I thought about Thomas and how he would have appreciated the irony. His final gift hadn't just secured my future, it had revealed the true character of everyone involved. The following Sunday, I hosted my first dinner party in the house since everything happened. I invited Mr. Patterson and his wife, along with a few close friends who'd supported me through the divorce. As we sat around Thomas' old dining table, sharing stories and laughter, I felt his presence in every corner of the house. Barbara made one final attempt at confrontation, showing up unannounced one morning with a manila envelope. These are photos, she announced, dumping them on my kitchen counter. Proof that you manipulated Thomas. I'm taking them to my lawyer. I calmly slid them back toward her. Go ahead. And while you're there, ask your lawyer about the consequences of contesting the trusts. I'm sure the Historical Society would love to give tours of this place. She left, but not before I saw the defeat in her eyes. She knew she'd lost, not just the house, but the power she'd wielded over the family for so long. Michael moved to a different city shortly after. I heard through mutual friends that he was telling people he'd left the house to me out of kindness, rewriting history to protect his ego. That was fine by me. I had the truth, and more importantly, I had Thomas's legacy. 1 year after the failed attempt to move Amanda in, I sat in Thomas's study, surrounded by his books and mementos. The house felt more like home than ever, filled with the warmth and history he'd always cherished. I opened his letter again, the one he'd given me before he died, and read the last lines that had given me strength through everything. My dear Olivia, a house is more than walls and a roof. It's a vessel for love, for memories, for the kind of family we choose rather than the one we're born into. You understood that when the others couldn't. Take care of our home, and let it take care of you. With all my love, Thomas. I folded the letter carefully and looked around the study, at the life Thomas had built and entrusted to me. Barbara and Michael had seen this house as a possession to be claimed. They never understood that it was really a gift to be earned through love, respect, and genuine care. Outside, Thomas's roses were blooming, their fragrance drifting through the open window. The house felt alive, not with the chaos Barbara and Amanda would have brought, but with the peaceful energy Thomas had always cultivated here. In the end, the property trust hadn't just given me a house. It had given me the freedom to honor Thomas's memory in the way he deserved. And somewhere, I knew he was smiling, satisfied that his home had ended up exactly where it belonged.